There'll be a couple of things that we'll do today. The first part of our time together will be hearing from Nicole Renee, who will talk to us about kind of college advising and college access in this new world of COVID impacted everything. So as you're talking to the young people that you work with, you'll have a better sense of, sort of what kinds of things are different, what are the same, what's some of the best advice you can be giving them in terms of navigating this new kind of brave new world, um, college in a pandemic. Who knew? You might have some familiarity with that yourselves. Um, the second part, and actually the larger part of this morning's session, is going to be really talking about kind of digital engagement and what is the best way to work with young folks. What are some of the best practices that people have come up with, including yourselves and your peers, around working with students in middle and high school and keeping them engaged in what it is that you're doing. So just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land. So with that, let's just jump into it. And the first part of our morning will be spent with Nicole Renee, who is a 20-year counselor in Philadelphia, Montgomery County, and Lehigh counties. She's an author, she's a speaker. She's been featured on KYW News Radio, iHeartRadio, and My New Philly. She has written 2 books for parents and students about both being connected to your child's school in a more meaningful way and college access and tips for parents and families on how to do that in a more significant kind of way. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about her, but about herself. But with that, I'll turn it over to you, Nicole, and the floor is yours.
As Janine said, I've worked over 20 years working with students in Philadelphia, Montgomery County, and Delaware County. I started off in 1995 with the North Philadelphia Freedom Schools. And that was the first year that program was here. So that's kind of how I got into this world of college access. And it's just a wonderful place for us to be able to give back to students and really play a role in just changing the trajectory of their family tree, and just giving them the ability to be able to be mentored by us and just be able to take their lives to the next level. And these are the people who are going to be taking care of us in the nursing homes and all the different places that we'll be. So we got to make sure that we do right by them so they'll do right by us and also the world at large. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Okay, so I hope everyone can see that. So if you guys can just drop in the chat and just make sure, because on my end, I see everything. If you can just let me know if you see the screen. Awesome. Okay. So they've asked me to talk today about the college admissions landscape in the era of COVID. And so a lot of us, if you haven't become a member or associated with NACAC, which is the National Association for College Admission Counseling, and definitely PACAC, which is the Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling, you definitely need to be connected to one or both of those organizations, because you'll be able to get a lot of professional development and they'll keep you sharp in this area. So our new CEO Angel Perez, left this quote for us. Right now, there are high levels of anxiety on the college side. The entire enrollment model is broken. On the high school side, counselors don't know how to counsel the next class. There's going to be some type of reinvention, but the question is, what does it look like? And after 6 months or 9 months, we still don't know what it looks like because it's changing all the time. And so one of the things that we have to do, especially you guys that are coaches here, and if you can do me a favor, if you can put in the chat and let me know how long you've been a coach. If you are new, if you have been here for a long time, if you can let me know in the chat what your status is. Okay, so my first year, 2 years, I'm new, third year, 2 years, first year, new. Okay, all right. So most of you guys are here for 1 to 3 years. That's amazing. Awesome. Okay. So I'm assuming that you guys have, gotten your training on college admissions and different things like that. So I'm not going to go too deep into that, but we will touch some aspects of that. Somebody else said that they started in September. That is great. So this landscape that we have right now, all the rules are kind of laid to the side. So there are some standard rules that are still in place as far as deadlines with rolling admissions, early action, early decision. Those are still things. Some of those dates have changed. Some schools have become a little bit more flexible with that. And so let me get back here. So what I've been telling my students and just the people that I'm dealing with is to take a deep breath, that we got you and we will not let you fail. So take a deep breath, regardless of what the rules are, regardless of what you see. We will not let you fail. And so one of the key things that you guys need to make sure that you do, and it's something that I've been doing, and that's probably why I'm so sleepy all the time, is to make sure that you look out for professional development opportunities. All these virtual tours, virtual workshops, of course, don't sit on all of them. But you learn a lot from the virtual tours that different campuses may have. They may have an open house. They may have a session just for counselors, and they'll give you the perspective of what's going on their particular colleges. So the first 10 or 15 minutes, everybody's really going to say the same things. And then once you get into the meat of the conversation, then you'll see kind of the particulars that are going on each college. You know, what colleges are making SATs mandatory, which one of them are allowing students to not have to take SATs for merit scholarships. You know, who has students on campus and why? Because you notice that many campuses have students on campus and some do not. And so there are different reasons that they have not done that. Some schools are very small, and when they're looking at how they can social distance, it's a reality on their campus because they may have a high commuter population, they may have more dorms, or they may have more singles or more doubles, and so they can properly put some things in place to try to social distance. But there are other campuses that are really big, they might not be able to do that. Some may have problems with PPE and how, you know, their buildings may be too old and they can't do ventilation the way some other schools can. And so that's why some of those schools have done it that way. So also when you guys looking at the different changes that are going on in the landscape, you also want to look at the varying perspectives that are going on at different levels. So one, you have the college perspective. So they're going through a lot of stress because they have to meet their yield in class quota. Because yes, they're supposed to educate people, but at the end of the day, colleges, this is a business. They need to make money. And so they're feeling a lot of pressure of meeting their yield and their class quota. And so they have been doing a lot of things to be able to get kids to come to their virtual programs. They have to work really hard to do that because they're competing. If you look at your email, how much email you get from everybody that's selling something, that wants you to do something. You know, some of the things you want to do, most of them you don't want to do, right? And so there's stiff competition. They have limited access to students to come to their campuses because a lot of the campuses are closed. And so they're restricted to these virtual tours that they have. Now, they have really stepped up their game with these virtual tours. And I'll show you an example of one a little bit later. There's one, Santa Clara University, that I'm going to show you. On their YouTube page, not only do they have a virtual tour, but they have a tour of the athletic facilities, a tour for transfer students. They have different videos for different populations of students. But colleges are really trying to see what they can do to get people on campus. And then, of course, they also have limited access to students because all of the college fairs, the physical ones, have been canceled. They can't visit a lot of schools. So at my school, I'm at a public school. It's a suburban urban school. So it's in Norristown. So we have the city of Norristown, and then we have West Norriton and East Norriton, which is suburban district. So we have a little bit of everybody at our school. So they've been doing virtual visits with us, but communication is very limited to get people there. Um, the big thing that the schools are dealing with, and I don't know if I spelled this right, but the birth rate cliff that is going on. How many of you guys know about the birth rate issue that's going on in the next couple of years? If you can put that in the chat. So basically what they've been saying is around 2024, 25, or 26, the birth rate across the country is going to go down. So there will be less children graduating from high school. Not because they failed out of school, but because less people are having children, especially on the Northeast part of the country. So that means that they're going to have stiffer competition for students. And so that's something they were already anticipating. And then COVID came and really just knocked that all out of whack. So that's an issue that they're dealing with. So quickly, they're also dealing with, they have to adjust their recruitment strategies, lower enrollment for students, because there are a lot of students that want to stay home, because they're saying, if I'm taking virtual classes, I'm not going to spend all this money to go all the way across the country if I can't, take these, if I can't get the full college experience. Then a lot of colleges have layoffs. They have increased expenses because they have to put in place PPE. The online courses, even though students are thinking that they need to get money back, it's actually very expensive to put that in place. And so they're dealing with those expenses. Loss in revenue because a lot of students are staying in dorms, the school stores aren't selling anything. If there's a big campus that is big in athletics, the games, they're not having games. And so they're losing a lot of revenue. So they're bending over backwards. So that is the first consideration. Then the next consideration is the student perspective. A lot of the students in the populations that I work with and the population that you're working with, a lot of kids are essential workers at the house. And so our school is over at 10:30 every day. They have live classes in the morning, and then in the afternoon, the students have what they call asynchronous work. So they have synchronous work in the morning, which is live, and asynchronous in the afternoon, which they have to do work on their own. So the work is due the next morning at 7:30. A lot of our students, as soon as it's time to log off, they go to work because either their parent may have lost their job, or they have to help, support the family, or they know that they won't, be able to get any money from their family. They have to, pay for whatever they need. So they're going to work. And so that means that they're working longer hours because they can go to work earlier. A lot of our students are dealing with food scarcity issues. So we give out food every other week on a Wednesday. So our school gives out 10 meals every other Wednesday for all of the children that are in that family. So a lot of our kids are babysitters for their siblings. So while they're trying to learn online, they're also, having to help their siblings. So this is affecting their grades. This is affecting them being able to fill out applications. This is affecting them to be able to do FAFSAs because they're tired, they're stressed, and they're already having issues with trying to learn how to organize their lives just as teenagers, period. And so now they have even more pressure to try to organize their lives. And then the big issue that you guys definitely know about in the news is the technology divide that the kids are having to deal with, because a lot of our kids don't have laptops. And so they had to get some from the city, from the school district. A lot of kids don't have Wi-Fi. So they're having to either, get the hotspots from the school, or some teachers don't even have Wi-Fi. They're sitting in the parking lot at the mall, sitting in the parking lot at the school, sitting in the parking lot at the Starbucks, trying to get Wi-Fi and things like that. And so, so of course, here you have all the stress and anxiety that they're going through about the fear of the unknown. SATs being canceled is one of the biggest stresses that my kids are dealing with, because I have kids and that have not taken an SAT yet, because every time they register for the SAT, it gets canceled. So there are some kids that have been having their families drive them to Pittsburgh, fly them somewhere, people who have money, but most of our kids don't have that access to travel far. So I've really been suggesting to my kids, don't go any more than an hour and a half to take that SAT, because sometimes they get there and that test is canceled. So there's only 2 more tests left. So there's one next weekend, so it's really too late to register for that one. And then there's one in December. So that's the last test that is recommended for them to take. So there are some next semester, but they're not until March. So I highly would recommend you not have the kids take it in March unless their plan is to go to the community college in the fall. So community college does not require SAT scores, but if the student is thinking about transferring to a 4-year school, then they should go ahead and take the SAT because they will need it eventually. But the other kids that are thinking about going the 4-year route, you want to have them take that test in December. Okay. And then the last thing, they have limited or no access to essential school staff. And that was already an issue before. And so now it's even more so. So I'm going to move a little bit faster. Our school counselor perspective, the same thing, scarcity in time. They're getting too many emails, webinars. They have a lot of responsibilities that they didn't have before. A lot of teachers are having issues with creativity with virtual learning, trying to figure out, some of these teachers have been teaching forever and they've been getting away of teaching the same thing the same way for 20, 30 years. And now they have to do something different. Teacher perspective, grades, kids not turning on their screens, which is something that you're going to see a lot. And so there are different reasons that kids are not turning on their screens. One, some of the kids, if they're sharing Wi-Fi with other kids, then that's going to chance them of their Wi-Fi or the popping off of the live. So some kids actually turn their camera off to spare the Wi-Fi. Some kids are embarrassed about how their houses look. Some kids, to be honest, they just didn't do their hair that day and they don't want everybody to see them. So just try to be patient with them with that. And then the last perspective is the parent perspective. A lot of our parents are essential workers, access to childcare, stress, financial concerns. So you see all of these things tie into what you're going to have to deal with when you're working with students, because if you may think that the student is apathetic or the student might not care or they're being lazy, but they're dealing with all of these issues and they have to rely on all these different people to get the things that they need to get their college applications done. And so just definitely keep that in mind when you're working with them. So ask them questions, how's everything going? How's your Wi-Fi? Ask them all those types of questions to kind of gauge why they're having the struggles that they're having. And some kids, are doing pretty well. So your response should be patience, understanding of why their screens are off, being creative of how to access students, because you're going to have a harder time accessing students than obviously you are when you're in the building with them. So, you might have to get on that TikTok, you might have to get on Instagram, you might have to do the DMs, to get in contact with them. I do a lot of Instagram DMs to get in contact with my kids. Repetition, you're going to have to repeat things over and over with them, because you may have told them how to do a process and they either forgot or they didn't write it down. And then most importantly, you want to communicate with their parents, because a lot of times parents are out of the loop. All right. So again, so just moving into more of the concrete things. And does anybody have any questions? Because I know I said a lot. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So the big thing and the big issue that we have with the kids are the SATs. And so like we said earlier, a lot of the SATs and ACTs have been canceled numerous times for different reasons. And so a lot of the colleges, as you know, are test optional. And so there's a website that I forgot to put on here, but there's a website called fairtest.org. Fairtest.org. That's FAIRTEST.org. So this is a website, this a company that's been around for a while now, and they really believe in colleges not giving out tests at all. And so when you go on that website, it'll give you all of the tests across the country. I mean, all the schools across the country that are test optional. And so that was way before COVID, but now because of COVID, there are more on there. So many of these schools are saying that they are test optional, and you're going to notice that a lot of kids have not been taking their SATs at all because they think that they don't need them. And that's not true. They need to look at each school to see what their policy is. So of course they can look at that website, but they can also go to each website, the website Fair Test they can go to, but they can also go to each school site to see. So test optional basically means they have the option to show their test scores or not. Test blind means that they don't have to give anything. The school is not interested in looking at their scores at all. But the main question, the number one question that you want to make sure that the students ask the colleges is the school test optional without any penalty? Okay, because some schools are test optional, but if a student is eligible for a merit scholarship that the college gives out, then they do need test scores. And so you have to ask each individual school what their policy is with that, because some schools still require that for maybe the nursing program or architecture or pre-med, or those merit scholarships. So you want to ask those types of questions. You want to ask them when, you want to talk to the students and strategize about when to submit their test scores if they do have test scores. So if they're applying to like a top tier school or an Ivy or a very competitive college, and let's say the student has a 3.9 GPA, and on paper they do meet the requirement for that particular school, they want to make sure that they look to see what the average SAT or ACT score that they look for last year. And if the SAT score or ACT score that they have meets that, then or exceeds that, then they should submit it. But if it's well below that, then they should not submit it because that will hurt them. So you want to talk with them about strategizing for that, because some kids will go, oh, I took the SAT, let me send those scores. Well, don't do that so fast. Also, if the school is test optional and does not require test scores for a merit scholarship, but they still have the same SAT score that they required for the year before, they should actually submit those scores. Because, so let's say the student has a 4.0. This is what's been happening. We have instant decision days at our school, which means that colleges actually come to our schools and they do admission on the spot. So let's say we're going to look at Shippensburg. They are test optional and they do not require test scores for a merit scholarship. But if I have a student that has a 4.0 and they have a high SAT score, let's say they have a 1200 or a 1300, that means that they may be able to get their merit scholarship bumped up higher. So you want to look into that as well to have them submit those test scores. Okay. All right. The second thing that you guys want to look at is campus tours. That's the big thing. So there are a lot of virtual tours that people can go into, but also a lot of colleges now have physical visits on campus. So tell the kids to take those masks, get that hand sanitizer, get those hand wipes, and go visit some of these campuses. So they will be giving you smaller tours, but some campuses do have tours. And I think I see a couple of questions in the chat. Yep, somebody says that this is the same case. Yes, this is the same case with the ACT. The ACT was doing some type of an online administration. I think that may be something that they are kind of testing right now. So right now, the schools don't really have any online tests except for that AP test that they had last semester. So you want to look at some different websites for virtual tours, and I'll show you a couple of those in a second. But a lot of campuses have virtual accepted student days, open houses. If you go on Instagram, if you go on Twitter, they have these Twitter chats. If you go on Facebook, even though most of our kids are not on Facebook, it's us, the older people. Some of you guys aren't on Facebook either. But, you want to go on there to see the types of virtual tours that they have. And there are some really good ones out. One of the best ones that I saw was for Full Sail University a couple of weeks ago. And the guy kind of gave a presentation, kind of what I'm doing now, but they went and did like a live tour of each program that they had at that campus. And the guy was very high energy. It was really good. So you definitely want to check out some of these. Bloomsburg University used to have daily college admissions programs every single day. Kutztown University at one point was doing an Instagram live every single day, taking you on tours of the campus. So students should definitely click into those social media pages of the schools that they're interested in to see what they have, because there's a lot of stuff out there. So again, this is an example of Santa Clara University, their YouTube page. So when you go there, they have a number of videos. So they have an overview of the school. They have a video for the application process. They have financial aid, and you see all of these, and they're very short. They're 11 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes. So definitely tell students to check out the YouTube pages for places that they're interested in. Now, these are virtual tours that you can register students for. So Philadelphia School District just had one the other day. It's a FAFSA virtual pop-up. And so the kids could get help with their FAFSAs. So this one right here is going to be one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have, because last year, and maybe the last 3 years, they always had these FAFSA completion workshops where families could go to the School District of Philadelphia and other sites. And can you guys tell me, if somebody can unmute yourselves and tell me if you guys also participate? I think you guys do in some of these that are going around the city that we had before, the physical ones.
I was at the last FAFSA one. I think it was like a year or two ago.
Okay. So, they've been floating around the city for the last couple of years. And so a lot of kids were able to get their FAFSAs done with this assistance. And now because of COVID, we can't. It's going to be more virtual, which is harder to do. And so I know that some of the data last year reflected that a number of students that are either first gen or low income students did not return to school last year because they could not get their FAFSAs done or for financial challenges. So you guys definitely want to make sure that you check in with your families frequently to make sure to see if they need help with their FAFSAs, with their fees, and to make sure that they're actually completely done. Because as you guys know, those things are very frustrating to do. And just to make sure that they get them done, even with the special circumstances. But you're going to see these things pop up all the time. And then NACAC has had 4 virtual college fairs. So the last one is coming up on November the 8th. It's about 600 schools that participate in the NACAC virtual college fair. I've been on each of them as either a participant or participated in the chat. But you can go on ahead of time, look to see what schools are coming. You can go ahead and favorite the schools that you want to look at. And then some of them have a live presentation, some of them have video presentations, and some of them actually have reps that will meet with the students for 15 minutes and they can go ahead and make appointments. So you definitely want to take advantage of that. Then here are 2 more. You have the National College Resources Foundation has the Black College HBCU Black College Expo. I participated in a number of these. These are really, really good. So they've been traveling across the country. So the next one is in Texas, quote unquote, but you guys can still participate in those. So there are a lot of historically Black colleges and universities that are represented at these workshops. Kids can get accepted at those things. They can fill out applications, they can get fee waivers and ask tons and tons of questions. And then the last one that I wanted to showcase is the Philadelphia Virtual HBCU College Fair. They have this every year at the School District of Philadelphia. I will be participating at this one. I will be doing a scholarship workshop at this one. But there are over 50 schools at this particular fair last year. I'm not quite sure how many are there this year. So you can still register for that. But it's a great opportunity for kids to be able to get accepted on the spot. I don't know how they're going to do that virtually this year, but there's a panel discussion. So this is a great opportunity. Now, some COVID tips. While you're talking to some of your students, I would highly recommend that you talk to them about maybe submitting a copy of their report card from last year if it was good, because a lot of the kids have pass-fail grades on their report cards depending on how their school wanted to do grades. And so some of the colleges are already assuming that those grades are padded. So if you have students that did very, very well the year before, then have them to submit a copy of that report card so that colleges can see that those students actually were doing well before COVID came. And then, of course, because a lot of schools are test optional, they will be asking for report cards this year. So just remind the students to make sure that they're doing well in their classes. Make sure they do extensive campus tours, whether it's a physical tour or again, they do those virtual tours. Build relationships with admissions counselors. This has been going on forever. They call this demonstrated interest. These colleges will kind of make a record of any time that students have been in contact with that particular school. And so if they have come in contact with someone at a college fair, if they've come in contact with someone at a college visit, or just randomly, they should definitely keep the email communication going with that particular rep, because that rep in most cases is the person that's reading their essay, reading their, evaluating their application. And so that is great. They want to make sure that they put quality time into their essay. So of course they should have been doing this before, right? But it's even more crucial now because since most colleges are test optional, they really need more measures to look at to assess the student, to see if that student is someone that they want at their particular school. So you want to work with them to look at their essays, one, to make sure that they're, fit in their word count, to make sure that they're doing all types of things correctly with that essay and showcasing themselves in the best light. And then lastly, in this area, you want to make sure that they get quality letters of recommendations. So sometimes it says that the recommendations are optional or the essays are optional. I don't believe that there's any such thing as optional because everything gives you an opportunity to showcase yourself. So make sure that they've asked at least 2 or 3 people that know them well, to avoid asking teachers that they have this year unless they had them before, because the teachers this year don't know them that well. And so you want to make sure that they get those letters. And colleges are also becoming more flexible with who those letters are coming from, because they know that kids have not gotten a lot of face time with their teachers this year or last year. So if they have a coach or if they have a club advisor that knows them very well and can speak on their character, can speak on their leadership skills, can speak on their teamwork, ability to work in teams, they definitely can use that as their second or third resource this year. And then you also want to look at college fit, which of course we always look at. But you want to make sure that, again, since a lot of kids can't really go on that campus, feel that campus, that they've looked through these websites deeply to vet them to see if they have the social life that they're looking for. Because when we're looking at fit, we look at that SLAM acronym. So S stands for social, L stands for location, A stands for academics, and M stands for money or monetary. And so social is very important because, of course, this is a place they're going to be for 4 years. They want to be realistic about their school choice. So if we have a 2.3 GPA, we really shouldn't be applying to, well, we can apply anywhere we want. Let me just say that. However, the goal is to get accepted. So if you have a 2.3 GPA and you're trying to apply to Bucknell or another top tier college, that's going to be really slim. So I don't really tell kids not to apply anywhere. I tell them that my job is to make sure that we increase the number of acceptances they receive, because they will call you a hater or they will say that you don't believe in them if you tell them not to do it. But again, our job is to make sure that they have the right choices on their list. And then on the opposite end, we want to encourage the kids to shoot their shot, because we have a lot of kids that have very good grades, but they have that imposter syndrome thing going on, and they don't apply to some schools that they are very eligible to apply to. So we want to encourage them to apply and look at those schools. We want to make sure that they keep the schools that they have a fit with on their list, regardless of the cost of the school. I have a number of kids that say, oh my gosh, this school costs $70,000. I can't afford to go here. Well, you don't know where you can afford to go because you haven't gotten your financial aid letters back. You haven't, filled out all of your scholarship applications. So you don't know where you can go. Okay. Or where you can afford to go, because some schools that are more expensive after you get through crunching the numbers, especially if the student fits a criteria that that school is looking for. They may give them enough money that it may be affordable for them to go there. And then they also want to do some research in this area of COVID on schools that could be merging or closing. So you kind of want to, do some Google searches, because there are some schools now, because of either the birth rate cliff that's going on or because of COVID and schools have lost money, that they're merging or they're closing. Okay. See if there's any questions. I thought I saw a question that was in the chat or a comment. Yep, SLAM. So somebody put that SLAM acronym down. Exactly. All right. Other considerations that you want to take into account, and these are COVID related and just regular things that you really should take in consideration. So we talked a little bit about staying on top of FAFSA and FIA, because again, there are no physical FAFSA completion workshops. And so you guys are going to be doing more one-on-one applications with students. And one of the main things that you want to look at too is that a lot of kids may be living with someone that's not their parent. They may be staying with their grandparent, their aunt, their uncle, a neighbor. And so you want to look to see, what type of custody situation that they have when they're filling out the FAFSA. So that's one of the things that people kind of get tripped up on. And maybe if we have some time later, I can explain that. You want to educate your families about applying early and waiting for all of the award letters to come back from the schools before they make a deposit. So that means, again, that they need to get those FAFSA applications done early and make sure that they get all of the letters back from every single school before they make a deposit and make a decision about where they're going to go to school, because those deposits are non-refundable. You want to remind them that this is a student market this year, because again, we talked earlier that colleges are having to bend over backwards this year and change the way that they do everything to recruit students. And so everyone is on edge because they have to meet those numbers, because again, remember that we said that they are a business. And so you want to make sure that they take a look at some schools that maybe they might not have been accepted to last year, but they may be this year, because schools are a little bit more flexible because of those test optional policies. And then lastly, they need to hunt harder for scholarships more than ever. So before, local scholarships were the gold mines of scholarships. And so usually around between December and July, a lot of local organizations offer scholarships for students. And so they could be from churches, they could be from local organizations, fraternities, sororities, different areas, for only kids in Pennsylvania or Philadelphia County or at their particular school, or in Montgomery County, Bucks, and Philadelphia County. But because of COVID, a number of those organizations don't have that money that they used to have, because it may have been based off of how much money they had in the stock market, or they had to have some kind of a banquet or a breakfast or a luncheon to raise money for funds to give to that scholarship organization. So there were a number of them that did not give out scholarships this past spring because of that. So anticipate that. So that means that they need to hunt for even more of those national scholarships and just dig deeper to find scholarships that they need. Okay. So I just wanted to leave the last of my time to ask you guys any questions, but I just wanted to let you guys know that the mentors, especially, you guys are an essential part of the team that you're working with. So these are the Bitmojis for me and my intern. Her name is Miss Sai. So she's been working with me this year. And so you guys want to make sure that you are a great intern, because sometimes we don't want to get interns and mentors because we don't know if either you guys we're going to be babysitting you, but we want you to babysit us, right? So she babysits me every day. She keeps me on task, and she's really, really good. And so please don't discount, who you are in this particular process and the value that you guys bring. So I'm going to just share a short story about what happened the other day. So on Thursday, I had an appointment at the end of the day with two of my students that I talk to all the time. And so they had little 15-minute appointments. And so it was Jordan, and the other kid's name is Gabe. So Jordan comes on and he's just talking, and he's really talking about nothing. We're just sitting there just talking. So I'm like, Jordan, you only have 15 minutes. Like, so what is it that you need to talk about today? He says, oh, I'm not here to see you. I'm here to see Miss I. I said, oh, well, she's not here today. He was like, oh. And so I said, well, what did you need? He said, well, we were talking about my essay. I needed some help with my essay because she's been doing a really good job on the essays. And he started talking about all kinds of other stuff. He never asked me for help with his essay. So then the next kid comes on, he joined in our meeting. So Gabe comes on, he's talking about nothing as well. So I said, Gabe, well, you only have like 10 more minutes. So what is it that you need to talk to me about? He said, oh, I'm here to see Miss I. And I'm like, about what? He said, about my essays. And I said, well, I can help you guys with your essays. And they just got kind of quiet because they had already gotten used to the level of service that she's been giving them, and they forged a relationship. And we talked some more, but they never really asked me to help them with their essay. So I told her about it and she just laughed. But she's just, the kids really respect her. They really look forward to working with her because she is closer to their age. And she's very good at what she does, and so they trust her. So please don't discount yourself in this era of COVID. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I just wanted to see if you guys had any questions. I tried to kind of go over some stuff that was COVID and not COVID related, because since some of you, this is your first couple of years here, this is some basic information that you would need to know. So does anybody have any questions? You can put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself.
One is asking if you could elaborate more on FIA, which is huge. And the second one is also huge, which is how would you recommend that we ask schools about their views or reactions to BLM, police brutality, and peaceful protests?
Wow, that's a deep question. So I'll answer the easier one first. So FIA is our state grant organization. I think it's the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, something close to that. But basically, they're in charge of the state grant. So when you are advising students on college financial aid, they first have to fill out the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. So that determines how much money, how much grant and loan money they get from the federal government. So they fill out that application. When they finish filling this application out, and this is key, if you don't remember anything else that I said today, have them to fill out their FIA grant application immediately after that application. Because if they don't, they're going to have to wait 2 or 3 days or maybe even 7 to be able to fill out their grant application. So the state grant application determines how much money they get from the state of Pennsylvania, but they can only get money from the state of Pennsylvania for schools that are Pennsylvania schools. Now there is an exception. There are 5 states plus DC that they can get money for if they go out of state. So I think it's DC, Delaware, Vermont, Rhode Island, maybe Massachusetts, and I think Ohio. But it's only like $550 or $570. If you were in the military, it's about maybe another $20 more. So they can lose up to $4,500 if they go outside of Pennsylvania. So please don't, if they want to go outside of Pennsylvania, that's totally fine. They just need to make sure that they know financially that they're going to lose some money so that they can anticipate that and apply for more scholarship money. So they need to complete the FAFSA and the FIA. Most kids forget to or don't know that they have to do that FIA application. So you need to remind them to do that. And when they do the state application, they need to make sure that they put the most expensive Pennsylvania school on that particular application. Okay. Now the harder question. Can you read that one again? It was a BLM question.
Yes, so it was, how do you recommend we ask schools on their views or reactions to BLM, police brutality, and peaceful protests?
And just to add to
Okay.
the question, it comes from, because some schools are test optional and going on these in-campus interviews or virtual interviews, you don't want to come off being attacking. You want to come off as angry, because there are some schools that have responded so poorly to what has happened the last few months. Even bringing it up, could that be a bad mark on the student? And should that be responsibility of a parent to bring up in a question? to protect the student in their application, or how do you go about doing that?
I don't know if they need to bring it up in their application. They can, of course, put it in the chat like you did, but most of the schools that really are supportive of what's going on, they have a statement on their website. As soon as you go to the website, it's right there before you can even go to anything else, or it's at the top of the screen, or it's in something related to COVID. And so, you can do a simple Google search, or you can look on the websites, but a lot of websites that I've seen, it's right there on the website. So, if you want to do some kind of a Google search to kind of see, but I mean, I don't think they're going to hold it against you. Again, their job, they're business people. So they have to keep this college open. They have to keep that college in business. But I guess the best tip that I can give you is to look to see what's on that particular website, or do a brief Google search. So is there another angle of the question that you have for me? Because I want to make sure I answer that correctly.
No, I think that's good. I think it's also like what Hillary just mentioned in the chat, like just when you're on those campus tours, asking those kind of questions, how do you bring it up in a, not like a dumbfounded kind of way, but a different way, so you're not trying to get into the nitty gritty of what they're actually doing.
Yeah, I mean, you could ask them what their response, the college's response has been to the situation. That's a safe question. And to be honest, I always tell students, when you go on college campuses, if you're going on a tour, it's going to be harder now because of COVID. Sometimes when I go on tours, I look for random students and I just ask them, so what's really going on this campus? Like, and they'll tell you. Some people are saying, hey, I'm just here because I've already put 2 years in and I can't afford to transfer. I'm just trying to just ride my time out, or, sometimes people say, don't come here, or one school I went to, they were like, the food is terrible here. Don't come here just because of the food is horrible, so you can ask students as well. Some of them have little chat rooms, or, things like that. But if you do those Google searches, if you do those hashtag searches, you'll be able to find out whose responses were good and whose weren't. Okay, somebody says, I think asking during tours and other opportunities to talk with folks, but not through the application. Yeah. You kind of want to keep that neutral as far as the application is concerned.
For the essay portion, do you have any tips or suggestions as to how our students can feel empowered into writing their essays in a way where they can express what they're feeling, but also come strong, as in, this is why I want to go to this school. This is why I feel that this opportunity would be helpful for me, because I'm trying to be a part of a movement or a part of an action. Like, are there any tips that you can share with us? What would you suggest? Because I feel like that's something that our high school students would need.
Mm-hmm. And is your question kind of also BLM related too?
BLM related, community oppression related. It's a lot of things that I feel our high school students are expressing and feeling, and that they don't have support for. But depending on what education you have, or how you express yourself, people will dismiss it, right? Because I can read it and I can understand, but someone else who has different views and opinions is just going to completely dismiss your paper because it didn't sit well with them.
I think that to answer this, and just anything that anybody writes that has anything to do with a life-changing issue, to make sure that that issue or topic is not more than 40 to 50% of the essay, because your essay is supposed to be a less than 40% of what the issue is or concern that they have. And then also the rest of it is supposed to be how that particular issue affected you and how it made you view something differently, and how it changed you and how you're going to be a different person, right? So a lot of times students will write essays where the entire essay is about this horrible thing that happened. So they don't want to hear, if the essay is 600 words, 500 words of a sob story. So that, hit the point in the beginning. Also, the first paragraph, if you lose them in the first 1 or 2 paragraphs, they're not going to read the rest of it, because most of these essays look alike. And so you want to make sure that you come up with some kind of attention getting, opening. Of course, some people may use a quote, or some people may use something, but maybe come up. I had a kid that wrote an essay about Pop-Tarts. And they talked about the different flavors of Pop-Tarts. And it seemed like a goofy essay. I'm like, why are they talking about Pop-Tarts? But it made me want to read it because I thought it was stupid, because this kid was like number 5 in the class or something like that. You know, so they can find something catchy to grab their attention at the beginning, you know, just to make the person want to read the essay. The colleges are used to now, especially in this movement now, to make sure that they are trying to be a little bit more open. A lot of schools do have a COVID essay question, but have the student to make sure that they don't do the COVID question unless they have a real COVID issue, meaning that, you know, a family member lost a job or somebody, you know, got sick or passed away from COVID, something that dramatically affected them. If they don't have anything that dramatically affected them that was related to COVID, don't do the COVID essay, because they're sick of looking at the COVID essays.
So thank you, Nicole Renee. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
And your information and your wisdom this morning.
My name is Candace. I work at the University of Pennsylvania with their Center for Community Partnerships, and I help manage the Gear Up program for UPenn and Drexel. So shout out to my Penn and Drexel coaches on the call with us today. So we are going to move into the next section of our training, which is focused on some best practices for virtual engagement in this kind of new frontier of youth work, and advising and coaching and tutoring and mentoring. So we'll talk about some different resources, some tools. We will do some breakouts to do brainstorming as a group, kind of share out lessons learned and resources that we've had success with. And yeah, so really excited to share some information with you. So I'm going to, the first part will be, you know, sharing of slides. Feel free to use the chat box for any questions. And then we will be doing the breakouts, like I mentioned, in a little bit. Just to set some virtual session norms. I think all of us have our display name as our name. Feel free to include your pronouns if you like. That helps us get to know who's in the room. You know, if we're calling on people, make sure we have your name correct. And then there's instructions there if you need to just change your display name. And then some virtual session norms. So stay muted unless you're speaking. If you can't have your video on, if that's comfortable for you, it's always nice to be able to look out and see faces instead of just the black boxes. But totally understand, it's a Saturday morning, you might not be prepared. Maybe you didn't do your face or your hair, totally fine. And then utilize the chat box, like I said, for any questions or comments, and take care of yourself. If you need to take a break, close your eyes, get a drink of water, a snack, feel free to do that as we move through. And today's agenda. So we're kind of at this virtual engagement best practices portion, and to do a quick temperature check. So you'll see these pictures of cats on the screen here. You can either put in the chat, or if you go to view options in the toolbar at the top of your screen and click annotate, you can circle or add a stamp next to the cat that kind of describes how you're feeling today. So either number in the chat, I see Lily's putting a number 6, Sebastian. Somebody's really feeling strongly about number 4. Lots of sleepy kittens. Feel that? All right, and you can put in the chat too if you haven't figured out the advanced annotations of Zoom yet. All right, lots of sleepy kitties. 5 and 6, okay. Awesome, 1 and 2. I like the combos as well, because we're complex people. We have multifaceted emotions. Awesome. So this is a great way just to check in, get a kind of sense of how the room is feeling. So I'm going to try to keep our energy up. I'm going to try to keep us focused and move us through this content pretty quickly so that you can get into the breakout rooms and engage with one another in a bit more of a kind of informal and discussion-based style. So who is in the room? So I'm going to come out of the screen for a minute and pull up a poll. So this you can do through your phone by texting, or you can open up a new window on your computer. And this is just to help me get a sense for, who's with us today. And it'll help me kind of guide my talking points. So we will bring this into full screen. Okay. So at the top of your screen, like I said, you should see a link, or you can text CETIN577 to, I think it says 22333. And then it should bring up these questions. And as you answer, they're going to pop up on the screen, and we'll get kind of a live update of, where people are from, what programs they're representing. I did test this out with my Penn students yesterday, so they have a slight advantage of, navigating here. If this is a little too much for you this morning, feel free to put it in the chat. If you're a Promise Corps, Gear Up Temple, other Gear Up campuses, Promise Corps, like I mentioned, you can put that either in the chat. And thank you, Anya, for putting the link in the chat, or you can text it in. Awesome. So I'll give that another couple seconds. And we're going to have a couple of questions here. So as I move through the questions, it should change on your screen, whether you're on a computer or on your phone. Great. All right. So very heavy representation from my students at Penn. Thank you for being here. I did see a couple Drexel students on the call, and some folks from other areas as well. So awesome. So next, I'm going to ask, hopefully this works. How long have you been involved as a tutor, mentor, coach, or facilitator? So we also had this question from Nicole earlier. But again, just to get a sense for, is this brand new? Are you, a veteran at this point? Have you been doing it for a little bit? But, we could always learn and grow and learn new things, right? Okay, great. It's a good mix here. A lot of new coaches, which is so exciting. Welcome to this work. It is fun. It is challenging. It'll keep you on your toes. And definitely provides lots of, great experience for future roles, responsibilities, jobs, etc. Great. All right, so I'm going to move us on to our next question. How confident are you in fulfilling your role as a tutor, mentor, coach, or facilitator in the virtual space? All right. Lots of variation here on our confidence levels. So some of you may have been working in this space for a while already. Some may be brand new to the virtual space, even if you've been working with youth for a long time. But it's good to see that there's no one who's not confident at all. We have a lot of experience and competency on the call. So we're going to use that in the breakout rooms, and throughout the session, you'll have a chance to share out kind of some lessons learned from this space. All right, and last, this is an open-ended question and will pop up live on the screen. What are you looking to gain from today's training? So I'm going to give this just a couple seconds to allow folks to think about and fill in. Knowledge, new ideas for virtual games and activities. Great. Tips. It's in the title of the training. So yeah, it makes sense that we'd want to learn that. Great. New resources, learning from others, experiences from other students, how best to support our students. Great. These are great. Awesome. So these are all things that I'm hoping to provide to you as we go through our session. All right. So that concludes our poll portion. So I'm going to switch back to our slideshow. Yeah, thanks, Z. It's kind of cool to be able to see those responses in real time, and kind of just switches things up a bit, especially on a large call where we, it might be hard to see everyone or hear everyone in the presentation. Okay, back to our slides. All right, so our session roles. So I will be your leader for today. I'm hoping that some of my Gear Up board members can volunteer for some roles. If you just want to put this in the chat. So if I could have somebody volunteer for the Stack chat. Stack, what this means in some of our programs, for those of you who don't know, if you'd like to unmute and add something to the conversation, you can type the word Stack into the chat box and we'll monitor that. Okay, thank you, Anya. So Anya's going to help monitor our chat box. And if you would like to speak, you can type that in and she'll let us know, what that order is for people who want to share out. So for notes, I'm going to skip this one for today. I think since we're recording, we'll have that covered. But if you are in a meeting where you need to keep track of notes, maybe you're teaching a lesson on essay writing skills, for example, and you want somebody to help you keep notes of questions and comments and strategies, you might put somebody on that role. So our vibes role, so that's just how we can help, if we need a break, if we need somebody to jump in to take a deep breath, if we're getting, maybe moving a little too fast, or that's just a monitoring of that. And Lionel's going to be on vibes. Thank you. And then a timekeeper. So this is just somebody to help me keep on track, to give us maybe, just a time check at the 10-minute marks. And Janine's already giving me private time checks. So Janine, if you want to jump in, or Lily, put in the chat as well. So thank you guys. This is just an example of something you can do to help structure your virtual sessions. All right, to the content. So thinking about supporting our students and what brings us to the work in the first place. So we want all of our students to get to this part of the pyramid. So some of you may be familiar with this graphic, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So our end goal, right, is we want students to achieve their full potential, to set goals and achieve those goals. But obviously we need to be mindful of these other foundational needs that need to be met and addressed in order to reach those kind of upper levels of this pyramid. So we're going to walk through, obviously, as coaches, as college students, as staff in the school building, it's not always possible for you to provide support directly for things like physiological needs, but it's something you can be mindful of in your engagement with students. If they seem tired, if they seem distracted, if they're irritable and they don't really want to participate, it's not necessarily about you or the content that you're leading. It could be because some of these other needs aren't being met. And so you might be able to connect them to resources, ask questions about, well, is there somebody at your school you could go to? Are there community resources? You could talk to folks like me or Brittany or Janine, who are supervisors in this space and can help connect to other resources so that you can help students get to where they need to be to receive all the amazing information you want to share with them about college, about their post-secondary pathways. Okay. So one of the things to keep in mind, we saw in that pyramid, and I'll go back to that for a second, there was those physiological needs and then safety needs. So this is something to keep in mind in a virtual space. We want to make sure that we're bringing our full selves to the space with students. So when we are engaging in a classroom setting or after school, keeping your camera on if possible. As a coach or mentor, setting and maintaining boundaries, right? So, we want to make sure that they're not, contacting us in the middle of the night, or that they're following us on social media. We got to, know our role and set those guidelines and boundaries just appropriately. Obviously, we're in this Zoom space, but we want to still be professional. We still want to show up and be our best selves. Appropriate time and space, being mindful of your background, using one of those lovely, I see Sebastian has an amazing Promise Corps background. That's a great strategy to kind of just have that clean look that avoids some distraction. We even have some Gear Up coaches who created Gear Up backgrounds, so maybe we'll display those a little later. Avoid eating during sessions, right? Anything that's going to be distraction, your phone, keeping those things kind of away. And then being observant. So if you're noticing, drastic changes in behavior from a student, if you're noticing other things that may be concerning, always know who your point of contact is, whether that's the student's teacher, if that's your Gear Up coordinator, if that's, somebody else in a supervisory role or a leadership role at the school, know what those kind of chains of command are so that you can, report anything that may be concerning. Other considerations for kind of this baseline safety, like I said, who's your point of contact? How are you communicating? Everybody communicates differently. And so it's good to have, email, phone numbers of who those folks are so that you can, communicate as needed. And then when should you reach out? If it's something concerning, definitely as soon as possible. Being mindful of teachers' schedules, right? They may not be checking email during the school day. So giving some time to, for those responses. And social media, like I mentioned, as a general rule, try not to or do not engage with students on like your personal social media accounts. Your Gear Up program may have a Gear Up Instagram, and that's a way that you can kind of capture their attention without crossing that boundary of like, mentor and friend. And a trauma-informed approach. So these slides will be shared out, and I've linked some things that can be helpful in just being aware of these approaches in the online space. So they will be available for you later. In the interest of time, I'm not going to dive too deeply into this, but some key points here. Routine and clear communication. There's so much happening right now, so much communication. And so having these things in a structured way and students understanding, that what your role is and what you're there to do, these things can be really helpful in making them feel comfortable and for setting them up to be engaged in your sessions. Prioritizing relationships, right? So we feel really disconnected right now. The next point here is to foster that connectedness. So prioritizing that, setting that foundation is going to help you with these other task-based things or skill-based things that you're trying to work with students on. Affirming students' competence, self-worth, and self-awareness, right? So when you're able to show and communicate to students when they're doing a good job, when they're showing up, when they're, it could be just a small thing, right? Of like, they came to program today. Recognizing that and supporting that and making them feel that is important. Model the engagement you wish to see. It's a Saturday. I was a little tired today, but I'm doing my best to really bring my energy to this, right? And so you're going to kind of have to give that to your students if that's what you want to see. And then be mindful of your own self-care and compassion. Also linked here is a self-care wheel with all kind of different areas of self-care to consider. So I encourage folks to check that out and find those ways that you're taking care of yourself. Because as people may have heard this quote before, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And so if you're not taking care of yourself, it's that much harder to take care, not that you're taking care of them, but to really fully be there for students. Okay. Another kind of thing to keep in mind is to be familiar with these online platforms. So to have a routine and to be confident in your space, you have to be familiar with the different spaces you're working with students in. So Zoom and Google Meet are the primary platforms for online engagement for our students in Philadelphia. So Zoom tends to be used, I know we use it in our after school space, and it kind of varies by teacher or school, whether they prefer Zoom or Google Meet. So these are things that you want to ask and check out before you, show up for your service. We practice some of the tools within Zoom today. So that annotation feature, sharing your screen, we're going to do breakout rooms later. A lot of those features are available in Google Meet as well, but may look a little bit different. Google Meet is free, so you can set up a Google Meet call, kind of test out those features before you engage with students if you're unfamiliar. Google Classroom. So this is where most students get their assignments from their teachers. Teachers post announcements there. It's unlikely that you'll have access to student Google Classrooms, but it's good to be aware of so that when you're checking in with students and you say, like, do you have homework today? Or did you do that assignment? And they say, I don't know. You can, kind of remind them, direct them that Google Classroom is maybe the space where they can find that information. And then the student portal. So students log in to that at philasd.org. And it's where they can access their grades, their attendance, and also tools like Naviance, which you may hear about in your work with students, which is a platform that contains modules and activities for college and career prep. So these are some screenshots just to have some visuals of Google Meet. So, you know, similar functions, but these may be in different places than you're used to in Zoom. This is what the student portal looks like. So you'll see there's assignments kind of on the home page, but they can also go to this portal where it will take you to Naviance. And this is what the Naviance homepage looks like. So that's just to kind of familiarize yourself with those different platforms. Okay, thanks Janine for that time check. So I'm gonna take a deep breath and get through these next few slides so that we can get to our breakouts. So thinking about building community in these virtual spaces. You know, we're used to being in person where we can see and feel that kind of energy, and it's very different in a virtual space, right? And so, you know, there are commonalities, but they may kind of, the approach may be a little different. So these are just some things to keep in mind in trying to build community with your students. So shared norms and goals, mutual trust. You'll see some themes here. If it's not, you know, a one-way exchange, right? These are relationships that you're building together for mutual benefit. Our activities, we want to think about, you know, we want them to be meaningful and intentional, that it's contributing to sort of, you know, the broader goals that we share. The effort, time, and energy for a virtual space is very different. A lot of times in person, we could kind of just show up to the classroom and kind of get in where we fit in. In a virtual space, it may take a little bit more time and prep to really be prepared and to be most effective in that space. In terms of relationship building and community building, a balance of formal and informal discussion and activities. If you only all work and no play, right? You know, students aren't going to be as excited to work with you. And it's also a lot harder to get to know them if you're not balancing some of those more informal activities. Student voice and choice. So when you can give students some power in these settings, you know, maybe there's a few different things on your goals or your task lists, and helping students say, okay, well, what do you want to work on today? What feels most important to you? Giving them options of how they want to do that. So if you're, the next point is opportunities for reflection. Maybe you have different ways that you incorporate reflection. It could be an individual journaling free write. It could be sharing out as a group. It could be a Google form. Kind of getting from students, you know, what matches their mood or their energy level for that day. All right, some other things to consider, and this is going to come up in your breakouts. What context are you working in? Are you in a classroom or in an after school space? One-on-one, small group, large group? What are you working on? Is it more assignment based? Are you trying to help students build skills? Or are you really focused on that relationship building and like social emotional development that comes from a mentorship program? And then what are you most suited to offer? So we're not, you know, experts in every field, right? So thinking about, you know, your role, if you're an undergraduate student, you know, really speaking to your recent experience or current experience as a college student and what that can offer to students, and kind of broadening their perspective and learning more about, you know, your campus or college life in general. Maybe you've been in this work for a while and you're really able to offer those nitty gritty details of college application process and FAFSA. So these are just some things to keep in mind generally when you're working in these virtual spaces with students. Some just examples of school day versus after school. I'm not going to read these. A lot of this, you know, is kind of self-explanatory. But I think the big difference here is in school day, you're often kind of following the lead of a school day teacher. And in after school, you get to shape that space a little more, or like in a workshop or mentoring session where it's not as structured. Okay, so we're gonna shift into our breakouts now. We will put in the chat a link to a Google Doc. If each participant could open this Google Doc, you will see that there is, you know, group 1, group 2, 3, etc. And you all have the same questions listed here. So first, you'll kind of break the ice, get to know one another a bit, do some networking. And then a resource exchange. So as you've been working with students, or even as a student engaged in virtual classes right now, what are some things that have been effective? What are you excited to participate in? What has worked well for you in your work with students? And you're going to kind of work together to come up with a list. So you might link some activities, you might describe, you might come up with a brand new idea for a lesson right now together. So we want this time to be kind of that hands-on application part of today's training. All right, so we're gonna, I think, do 15 minutes for these breakouts because we want to save a few minutes at the end for sharing out. And I believe that Janine has the breakouts set up. Is that correct? All right. So any questions that you have before we break out, pop them in the chat box. And otherwise, we will get started for this next section. Thank you guys for, I already saw some great things coming through the Google Doc. I wanted to get, we only have about 5 minutes, but was there anybody that wanted to share out of particular resources that you were excited about or recommendations that you're looking to implement when you do your work with students in the next couple weeks?
A great idea by our Promise Corps members. We've been using like Kahoot and Jeopardy, but they had this great idea to let the students like make the questions and information themselves so that they can have some agency in deciding like what's the most important for them to remember and review. So I thought that was a really good idea.
That is a really good idea. I love that. Again, with the student voice and choice, always trying to get them to take that ownership. And then there's some cool things that we can think about. So I know that the Norristown folks are working with middle school students. Maybe there's ways to engage our high school students as mentors for the middle school students, kind of get some more, different opportunities for students to, they've learned some things and how can they share those things, them not just as like recipients of service, but then giving back to other students or even their peers. That's great. Any other quick share outs before we wrap up? I wanted to highlight also in the doc, I just saw some really great things come through that I just wanted to echo. The Dice Time Fitness, which is really just assigning movement to sides of a die, just to get students moving. I feel like everybody's just kind of sitting and stuck in their front of their computers all day. So when you can get movement in there, I think it can really help the energy level of students. And there's so many great games in the doc now as well. And I think that games allow for a sense of escape and excitement, especially when things are so heavy and isolated at the moment. So hopefully you all found that helpful to connect, to talk, and to build out some of those resources for yourselves as you continue your work with students. And the last thing that I wanted to wrap up with is to just get a sense from you all of, were there anything in sort of how we facilitated today's training that was helpful or kind of demonstrated some of the things that you can do with your students? I tried to sneak in some of those best practices into the training itself. Was there anything in particular that you learned today that you want to take to into your programming with students?
I personally enjoyed the stack style of keeping track of talking points and who goes next in terms of sharing. That was a very interesting and I think efficient way of making sure that everyone feels heard.
Yeah, because it can get scary and awkward to try to like insert into just like speaking, and also really helps kind of, feels more democratic in that like, you have to kind of follow the order of like who wanted to speak. So yeah, it's been really helpful. Thanks for pointing that out. Anything else?
I appreciated the reminder about using poll everywhere. I think that's a great way to get folks kind of engaged early on in a sort of a less threatening way. You're just sending in to a phone call. So.
Yeah. And there's another similar site called Mentimeter, which I like the aesthetics of better, but for Penn, they recommended poll everywhere for like security reasons or something. So lots of options out there for sure. All right, any last minute questions, comments, concerns, recommendations before we close out?
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for taking the time on a Saturday. We really tried to jam in a lot of content. I'm going to share in the chat now a link to a Google Drive folder. I just also wanted to mention that one of the documents in here, you'll see in here a shortcut to a Google Doc called Additional Materials for Gear Up Coaches. This has a wide range of stuff linked in it, links to implicit bias tests, to Instagram accounts to follow that are kind of help you keep connected to on the ground in Philly, like what's happening here, especially since a lot of us are kind of remote and in other spaces and not kind of in Philadelphia as we would be normally. Some readings on race and education and the school district and things just to kind of ground the work that we do and the context. So that's there for you as well. And I will continue to add resources as well as the document you all created today. So yeah, again, thank you all. This was great. And I appreciated sharing the space with you.
Awesome. Thanks again to Nicole Renee, to Candace, to Brittany, and to the board team at Penn. And for all of you, to all of you for sharing your part of your Saturday with us. Happy Halloween if you celebrate such a thing, and be safe. Thanks again, and everybody take care.